An ancient manuscript of a lost gospel is brought up to Jordan Peterson as a reasonable alternative to the New Testament Bible, but it's actually way worse. And this was brought up by none other than Alex O'Connor, an atheist YouTuber who's had conversations with intellectuals like Richard Dawkins to William Lane Craig. But what makes this part of the conversation even more egregious is that earlier, Alex O'Connor was able to get the answer to the question that many people have been asking Jordan Peterson.
If I went back in time with a Panasonic video camera and put that camera in front of the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, would the little LCD screen show a man walk out of that tomb?
I would suspect yes.
So despite Jordan Peterson's affirmation of a bodily resurrection of Jesus and the Orthodox view of that, Alex O'Connor continues to present a controversial view that isn't just in contradiction with what we know to be in the New Testament, but has been rejected by all of church history. Now, I'm going to be honest, this is deeply personal to me. Why? Because one of my best friends in college went through a world religions class, and this specific worldview completely disrupted and led him down a path of deconstruction and deconversion in the mid-2000s. See, at the time, this belief was so pervasive that it even inspired one of the biggest movies of that era, the Da Vinci Code. These ancient manuscripts influenced the Da Vinci Code by introducing themes of hidden knowledge and alternative Christian narratives, particularly regarding the role of Mary Magdalene and the nature of Jesus. These texts suggest a more mystical and less orthodox interpretation of early Christian history, which the novel uses to create a compelling and controversial storyline that questions established religious doctrines and highlights the idea of suppressed truth within the church, most notably that Jesus was really married to Mary Magdalene. But before we get into that, guys, my name is Ruslan. This channel exists to encourage, empower, and inspire you to live a life that blesses God. In order to do that, sometimes we have to call out the falsehoods being perpetuated in culture to get properly aligned of what the truth of living God's way is. By the grace of God, I've been walking with Jesus for over 20 years, married for 16 years, and this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So if you're new here, or if you're not new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button, as a huge percentage of the people who watch the channel, unfortunately, are not subscribed, and we're on the cusp of reaching 600,000 subscribers. All right, let's jump into my reaction to this part of the conversation, Jordan Peterson and Alex O'Connor.
I talked about this the other day, and I should have looked it up. I can't remember which church father it was that was telling the church community, the early church community, when you go to a new place, don't ask to be taken to the Christian church, ask to be taken to the Catholic church, because otherwise you might end up in a Gnostic church. It was so popular.
Right.
And a lot of the Gnostic tradition says that the thing that's being gotten wrong is the idea that there was this literal resurrection.
Right.
No, the kingdom of God is here and now. The resurrection is inside of you, and you attain it through gnosis. I mean, the Gospel of Thomas, which is probably the most famous.
Okay. Jordan Peterson finally gives us a clear answer. If you were to pop up in front of Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, would you see the rock roll over and Jesus come out? Jordan Peterson finally gives us, I would suspect so. That's as clear as you can get to a yes.
That's fire.
Right? Amazing. He gets the answer. He gets the answer we've all wanted. And then goes, yeah, but like the Gnostics, I like those guys. Because if you go, make sure you go to Catholic church, because if you don't go to Catholic church, you're going to go to a Gnostic church. And then he references the Gospel of Thomas. Now, there's a couple things here. Okay, for starters, Alex has to know this. And by the way, this is extremely pervasive today. Gnosticism is extremely pervasive today. The idea that you grow in sanctification and get closer to God into the resurrection by just knowing more stuff, that's almost in every stream of Christianity. There's only a couple streams of Christianity where there's an emphasis on practicing your faith. Our faith should be a practice. Work out your salvation. A lot of folks, you need more knowledge of whatever specialty there is, with more knowledge of their special doctrines, more knowledge of their special theology. I remember getting to a conversation, and this is not an indictment of all reform-leaning pastors, but I remember getting a conversation encouraging a pastor that was at the church I was at, hey, we should take people through Financial Peace University because a lot of people in our church in debt, and they're struggling, they're living paycheck to paycheck. It's creating a burden on their finances. We need to not just teach them more theology. What do we tell the person that wants to get out of debt and get off of prescription medication? He goes, they just need to look in the mirror and preach the gospel to themselves. That's a form of Gnosticism. They don't need a program. They don't need to go through Financial Peace University. They don't need to know how to handle their money God's ways. They don't know how to be responsible. They just need more information. But I would beg beg to differ and say they need more information that causes transformation and action. Not only is this not pragmatic, I understand why this is interesting to Alex O'Connor, because now I have to mitigate the reality that Jesus bodily rose from the grave. I can minimize that. That's my first issue with Gnosticism, which is everywhere. My issue number 2 is, Alex, in the Gospel of Thomas, if you want to be Mr. Progressive in women's rights, brother, in the Gospel of Thomas, it says that a woman must die and come back reincarnated as a man to be saved. So here's the verse that I was referencing. Simon Peter said to him, "Let Mary leave us, for women are not worthy of life." Jesus said, "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male, so that she too can become a living spirit resembling you males. For every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of God." Now, the most egregious part about this is Alex O'Connor knows that this verse is at the end of the Gospel of Thomas. And he brings this up to the 2 different conversations he had about the Gospel of Thomas on his channel. Check it out.
"Now I will draw her to me to make her male," Jesus said, "to make her a living spirit resembling you males. For every woman who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." And there it ends, the Gospel according to Thomas. "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male. She too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." As somebody who seems to have a fondness for the Gospel of Thomas, what do you make of this?
Now, that's what the Gospel of Thomas says about women, specifically Mary, and her not being able to enter the kingdom of God until Jesus first has to make her a male. First transformer in history, perhaps. That sounds a lot like that ideology. Now, here in Luke chapter 10, verse 38, look at the contrast that we see exhibited by Jesus' actual words in the Gospels. Outside of them women being the first ones to discover the empty tomb, look at what he actually says to Mary and Martha. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister, Mary, sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. So here, Mary is allowed to sit and be taught by Jesus. Stark contrast with what Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas. So one of the most obvious reasons why the Gospel of Thomas was rejected by the early church and never made into canon is because it directly contradicts how we see Jesus not just engaging with women, but empowering women to be his followers. You think that's cool? You think that the gospel... Come on, man. So it's like people they need the resurrection to be false so bad that they will jump into complete nonsense like the Gnostics because they just don't want Jesus to rise from the grave. And so you'll reference, oh, Thomas and the early church and Gnosticism and blah, 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 blah. But do you know all the wild stuff about the Gnostics?
So they're pointing to the Gnostic gospel books and saying, oh, but these were cut out and there's all this crazy stuff. Yes. And there's reason to believe that Jesus isn't real. And then... Not
that Jesus isn't real. But it gets deeper than that. That Jesus didn't bodily rise from the grave.
But then at the same time, those books are rejected because they're so clearly not in line with anything else in the Bible.
Yes.
And that part is completely left out.
Either they're not in the Bible for 2 reasons. One, there's questions of authenticity. And 2, there's questions about being outside of orthodoxy, right? Way outside of orthodoxy. So you believing a woman can't make it to heaven unless she dies and comes back reincarnated as a man.
Darkness.
I mean, that's really outside of orthodoxy. You see Jesus with women followers. You see the first women discovering the bodily, the empty tomb women. Like you see women all a part of Jesus' ministry. Jesus did more for women's rights than any other historical figure ever. And to be in this whole so anyway, let's play the rest of this.
Side of you, and you attain it through gnosis. I mean, the Gospel of Thomas, which is probably the most famous non-canonical gospel, and could have been written at the same time as like the Gospel of John. This is an early text. Doesn't even mention.
Notice the language. Could have been written.
Could have been.
By the way, next time you hear a doomsday article, try to pay attention to how often that word "could" is in there. So it could have been written, but was it written? No, it wasn't written around the same time as the guy. And you date the Gospel of John probably later than most people. So now we're moving down the Gospel of John and then we're moving up the Gospel of Thomas. Why? Because it's convenient. Because I don't have to deal with the bodily resurrection. Because I don't like the bodily resurrection. Because I have the presupposition that you cannot be something supernatural like a resurrection can't happen.
Resurrection doesn't mention a crucifixion. It's a list of sayings.
Yeah.
And the very form of that book as one scholar whose name I've forgotten, unfortunately, has pointed out, of that collection shows that these people believed that the thing that's important is not what Jesus did, but what he said. The thing that's important is the knowledge. The thing that's important, right? And
because I don't need someone to deal with my sin issue. I don't need someone to make me born again. I don't need someone to sanctify me. I'm already a good person. So it's not about what Jesus did for me. It's not about what Jesus did on the cross. It's not about the fact that Jesus rose from the grave. It's just about what Jesus said. He said some good stuff. The issue is it's and both, what Jesus did and what Jesus said. And the fascinating thing about this is one of my best friends, we by the way, we worked this out almost 15 years ago. One of my best friends in his sophomore or junior religious studies class, his version of deconstruction was he basically got exposed to these ideas and became a Gnostic for a season. So the fact that Alex is bringing this up for like this kind of cliche psyop that is presented to Christians in world religions class is so ironic that he's bringing this up. Like, we sorted through this, and the way Jordan Peterson deals with this, by the way, he cuts this whole thing off at its legs very quickly, and it's beautiful.
What does it mean to become a Gnostic? Like, what does that entail?
It's less of becoming a Gnostic. It's more of a sect of a church that believed that the bodily resurrection of Jesus wasn't real. It was more symbolic, and that it's not about being born again. It's about attaining more information. Gotcha. Gnostic is about so when we say Gnosticism has crept into aspects of the church, it's usually and it manifests in a high view of the spiritual and a low view of the material. Right now, you see the problem with a high view of the spiritual and low view of the material is Jesus was both what? Spiritual and material. Yeah. Fully God, fully man. And so it minimizes the material in the name of the spiritual and the informational knowledge, to know. Gnostic means to know. It's crucial because this is at the crux of the incarnation story.
So this resurrection stuff sort of doesn't matter. Now, the thing is, in that early church community, somebody who said, well, this question of like the resurrection as a physical, historical event, that you're kind of missing the point. The thing that matters is like the resurrection that takes place inside of every person. Yeah. It sort of sounds a little bit like the kind of approach that you would take. Now, if that's true, that would mean that in the early church, you'd have been condemned as a heretic.
So did you see what he did there? Yeah. Jordan Peterson affirms that the tomb would have been empty. If we could time travel with the camera, he affirms that the tomb would have been empty. And Alex, and I don't know if he's trying to do this intentionally. Either he can't handle the answer that someone as educated and smart as Jordan Peterson would do this, or he's trying to manipulate the answer, or he's having his own moment of crisis. I don't know what's happening here, but the way he's trying, and again, go back and watch the earlier conversation, but the way he asks him a very specific question, Jordan Peterson gives him a very specific answer, and then he goes, so what you really are is you're a Gnostic. And Jordan Peterson brilliantly redirects him.
I feel like he didn't expect Jordan Peterson to give a different answer than he's given on other podcasts. And so I think he had a line of questioning that he wanted to go down that completely fell apart when Jordan Peterson actually gave a very clear answer for the first time ever on his podcast, but then was like, I still have this line of questioning and this perception of what Jordan Peterson actually believes versus what he just told me.
It sounds very disjointed.
It's super disjointed. Yeah. Because it doesn't make sense. He's like, that's kind of what you believe, right? Yeah. And it's like, nah, he just said he believed Jesus died and rose.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A modern Catholic says to you, Jordan Peterson, are you a Christian? What do you think about Catholicism? I think that the reason that they're interested is because if it's true what I'm saying, then they would have to say, oh, I suppose, at least according to my understanding of Catholicism,
that's a form of Gnosticism.
I can't count you among my number,
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why people are interested. And I wonder if you agree.
Well, what would you say? That would constitute a genuine form of inquiry, for sure.
And I wonder if you feel like I don't know.
See, one of the things I really like about the bodily tradition of the resurrection is that what it does that's so remarkable is that it doesn't desacralize the body. And that's very, very important.
That's that right there. That's another affirmation of the bodily resurrection. Now, whether or not Jordan Peterson is born again, whether or not he said the prayer, whether or not he's got baptized, that's beside the point. The fact that he goes, what I like about the physical, literal resurrection is it doesn't minimize the physical. It doesn't minimize the material world, that we are in a material world to do good, that there is a time and a place and a purpose for us on this side of eternity. And to just make it about more knowledge and secret knowledge and all these things to become more spiritual and more enlightened and more smart. But what are you doing with your life? How does your life look day to day? What kind of person are you becoming? What kind of neighbor are you? Right? And so I was so excited for Alex. And then within a few moments of this interview, so disappointed that he decided to take it. And bravo for Jordan Peterson in the way he answered this, because he doesn't say, no, you're wrong. No, the Gnostics are wrong. He says, no, the reason why I like the bodily resurrection is because it rightfully affirms that the physical and the material world matters. When Jesus comes back, he will come back in a physical body. When Jesus comes back, he will establish a new heaven and new earth. When Jesus ascended, he ascended in a physical body. When Jesus was walking with the apostles, he was in a physical body. When he made them breakfast, he had a physical body. He appeared to over 500 people. He was in a physical body. And again, this sort of heresy creeps into many streams of Christianity. Many streams. Everything from the hyper-Calvinists to the hyper-charismaniacs. You just want another word. You just want more theology. You just want more head knowledge. You just want more secret information. And once you get more information, right? And so it's like the affirmation of this, I think, is so, this is so key. This is so key.
I think the fundamental problem with Gnosticism is that it becomes it's very easy for it to become a doctrine that's contemptuous of the body and contemptuous of the material world.
A great deal of the Gnostic tradition literally believes that the material world is created by an evil demiurge.
Right, exactly. Right? Well, exactly.
Yeah. And so the Gnostic, in the Gnostic version of everything, they believe that the God of the Genesis story is backwards. They believe that the serpent who offered them the knowledge of good and evil was actually God, and that the God was actually Satan.
If that ain't the most clear
backwards,
this is not orthodoxy.
This ain't it.
This is actually what Satan's goal is to do.
This ain't it. And so again, I don't know if Alex is genuinely just curious, or if he's trying to do this slightly manipulative thing. But it's so gross to me, because we worked this out. There's a reason why no one's a Gnostic, like actually a Gnostic.
Yeah.
Because when you read the Gospel of Thomas, you go, wait a minute, they said what about women? They said what?
Exactly.
And Jesus comes to save us from that.
The insistence on the bodily resurrection is a medication against that.
Oh,
and it's an effective one.
I would really love to ask about Genesis. This might be a bit of a tangent, and tell me if it's uninteresting to you.
And so it is uninteresting to me, Alex. And that's when he goes on to explain Genesis, God is the snake, the real God is Satan. And when my friend sat me down, Brandon Bourne, shout out to Brandon Bourne, he sat me down, he told me this conversation. He was like, I don't know, I think my professor's right. I think that. I was like, bro, this is nonsense. This is clearly nonsense.
So that's how like college professors were teaching the Bible, where it's like there's like really important things, and it's also good to know that there's books that didn't make it in that said it's actually not about the resurrection. It's all about the knowledge. And that's why we feel comfortable teaching it at school, and that's a good way to interpret the Bible is spit out the bone and eat the meat.
Yeah,
which
basically
the bone is actually the meat.
Now, the good news is that Brandon ultimately came back to an Orthodox faith, went on to serve in ministry, now is happily married with 4 kids and is doing great now. But in the process, it did cause quite a bit of heartache and personal struggle in his life. So I don't know if Alex is genuinely curious about Gnosticism as a reasonable alternative to Christianity, but you know it's a problem. We're outside of the creation and fall story being inverted and literally making God the serpent in Genesis, that other fringe groups within Christianity, as well as Islam, as well as now atheists, all like this idea of the Gnostic gospel, where Jesus didn't bodily rise and that you don't actually have to place your faith in him. It's really about attaining secret knowledge to make yourself more sanctified. Side note, it's interesting that the Gnostic Gospels is actually what influenced Muhammad's view of Christianity and why he thought the New Testament and the Old Testament was quote unquote perverted and changed. Ultimately, an encounter with Jesus and the teachings of Jesus isn't just about secret knowledge. It's about getting us to live God's ways, because when we live God's ways, we will be in God's will. And the best place to discover God's ways is in God's word. And that's ultimately what we're hoping to do here by empowering people to be the priest, provider, and protector of their home, which is why we're having our biggest sale of the year with our brand new Priest, Provider, Protector launch that's happening right now. You can get our prayer journal for $19.99. It's the cheapest we ever had it, as well as some awesome Father's Day gifts from our Priest, Provider, Protector launch, and some mugs and other pieces, as well as our marquee Bless God items. So if you want to get something, go to blessgod.shop and get yourself something. and get that father or father figure or mentor something for Father's Day. All right? I'll see you over there. Peace.